So we're gateáil sa isteach a chuird inniu chuig an gcórá fiúil seo agus ar muochas ar dús le Dave Brennan agus an firin ar fad I Casa Bookshop as ucht an imeacht seo agrú. So Dave, big thanks for arranging today. I'm delighted to welcome our guests who with their respective books are making valuable ongoing contributions to the literary landscape. In 32 words for Fields and While Nathan, we have two titles that very much resonate with one another. They are rich in detail, informative, thought-provoking, and they also happen to be very entertaining. So without further ado, Seán Lysaght is an award-winning poet and nature writer. For many years, he lectured at the GMIT Mayo campus in Castlebar, where he was central to the development and delivery of a heritage studies program, which continues to thrive. He has lived with his wife Jessica in Westport for many years, but still considers himself a proud Limerick man. Manchán Magan is a writer, broadcaster, and documentary maker. He has written books on his travels in Africa, India, and South America, among other places, and has also written a number of novels. He has presented numerous documentaries on the issue of oral culture, including on and through the medium of the Irish language, for the likes of TG4 and RTE. He is currently residing in North County Westmeath, near Lough Lane, where I understand you are honing your farming skills during the COVID lockdown. So lads, tá fáilte roisteach. So Seán, tutsma latsabéidir, I just might start with yourself. In While Nathan, you continue with your practice of bringing landscapes and wildlife alive, in addition to layering it with the rich local history and folklore. How did the book come about, and how does it link to your previous works?
Well, it's connected really to the book Eagle Country, Fergal, and you joined me on a few of those walks for Eagle Country there around 2016, 2017. And Eagle Country was a series of summer excursions, basically, looking at where eagles had been recorded as breeding or where they'd been observed in the past. And so when Eagle Country was complete, I began to think about the winter season in those same places. And I thought to myself, could you write a book that would give a portrait of the winter landscape, the elements, the weather, colors. And it was a kind of a challenge to me because most of the time you think of tourism in the West as a summer event when people are on the beach and when the weather is perhaps mild or kind. So I thought, what would it be like in winter to go out there and looking at things when most of the birds have gone, most of the flowers are over, and what would it be like? And then beyond that, I began to focus on the idea that, look, this is a place that I know fairly well, that I've been walking and going fishing and exploring since I moved to Mayo in '94. So I had quite a bit already in the can, if you like, but then there was a further challenge to kind of try to capture the place. I'm thinking of Tim Robinson going around Inishmore Aran, clockwise. Is there a way in which you could kind of capture the Erris landscape in a similar way? How would you structure it? And Erris has challenges because there are so many peninsulas and because there's no convenient kind of loop or ring. So I started in the west, which was an area I knew fairly well already. And then I went south and then east and then north. And I completed an anti-clockwise circuit of the area. And that's pretty much how the thing was structured in the end.
Very good. And of course, the book is divided into those sections, north, south, east, and west. And I should add there, in a recent review, you were described as being on a par with Tim Robinson and Robert McFarlane. So I'm sure that was a nice thing to read.
Well, I always blush really at that particular comparison, because I think Tim Robinson's work really is on another level because of the depth of his inquiry and the fact that he was not only going out to get material to write, but he was also compiling maps. And he has this beautiful description of how when he was out there, walking, each step would be a mark on the map. and each mark on the map would be a step, you know. So you can honor Tim Robinson's achievement, but I don't think you can emulate it. I think it really is on a separate level, given its scale and the fact that it was sustained over so many years.
Yeah, well, I think anybody familiar with the Nathan Beg range or anybody that's intending to familiarize themselves with it will greatly appreciate what you've put down on paper for that area anyway, I think, you know. But anyway, Manchán, I suppose, like we're all kind of familiar with the cultures of the North and the idea that, you know, certain communities have multitudes of names to describe snowflakes or, you know, types. And I guess in essence, that's what's happening here. Although I should caution that anybody that comes into this book thinking it's simply 32 words for field is in for a bit of a surprise, because you do kind of open up a portal to, a huge number of worlds, some of them otherworldly, but you certainly put your international travel to good use with this. So I suppose similarly, what was the context, the background to this, and what led up to it?
I'm torn now. Like, Seán has opened up so many interesting topics there about Nathan and about talking about nature, and I'm just entranced by that. So I'm having to pull myself away from all those interesting concepts and to think about my book. Hopefully we will be able to join them all. So the book, 32 Words for Field, what I wanted to do was, I realized that most of us talk and regard the Irish language in a rather confined way, the majority of the people. And it always struck me, the paucity of topics and angles whenever we discuss the Irish language. We either say that it was taught badly in school, or what use it is in the modern world, or isn't it a shame it's dying? And I thought there are so many other things that I would love to communicate about the Irish language, particularly how long it has been spoken on this island. And when you have a language that has been in the one place for so long, the insights that would have gathered up in that over the years, over the eons, the different mindsets, the different ways, perspectives on nature, on the other world, on the human psyche. And I realized all of that is redolent within the Irish language. And in fact, any Gaeilgeoir from the Gaeltacht and any fluent enough Irish person wouldn't know that. They'd see all of these references to mythological creatures and to concepts of psychological different realms, and to real specifics about animals, about insects, about the seasons, about nature. And I thought I would love to write a book. First, I would love to be able to read a book that had all of that in it, these other richnesses within the Irish language. And then when I thought it wasn't really available, I thought I'll write it. And I mean, in some way, I didn't feel qualified because I am no academic in anything, and I did a degree in Irish years and years ago, but I'm no way an academic. And even my Irish, you know, I don't have fluent native Irish from Gaeltacht. I would have spent a lot of time in West Kerry when I was young, so immersed in it. So I just thought, well, there's no one else has done it, so it's left to me to do it. And that was what I wanted, to gather up all of those ideas and just to incite people's minds and to think, wait there's other ways we can look and regard our landscape, our heritage, our culture, and those other weird realms that we believed in until we took on this rational, reasoned mindset of enlightenment that we still have access to in the Irish language.
And just by way of bringing you back in, Seán, I know, Manchán, you kind of suggest the idea of us using or place names as a threshold. And Seán, in fact, one of your grounds up inside of the Own Duff actually has the term threshold built into its place name.
Yeah. Tarsachan Mór, Tarsachan Mór, or Tarsahan, as they will tell you in Mayo. And for me, that is a kind of a gateway, an entry point into the Nathans. And it's the place where I met that man, Paddy McHugh, the man who told me about the giant that lived on top of the mountain and pointed up towards the Leachta Dahibon. So yes, absolutely, the place there and the place name kind of nails that idea of a point of entry into another world.
And you mentioned Paddy McHugh very early in the book, Seán, and I remember you telling me about him years ago, but almost instantaneously he's telling you about Dáithí Bán. And Manchán, I know that's something you lament, is the fact that, the generations that have come subsequently have almost, turned their back on that kind of the other world, and, the Niscéalt and the Pishoga sin ar fad. So it must be kind of reaffirming to you that Seán meets a man of a certain ilk, of a certain generation, and, absolutely no strangeness to him introducing these kind of otherworldly characters.
Yeah, well, I think particularly what I find exciting is these were always just about alive. These were marginal concepts. The idea that the folklore, that the other way of seeing the world was out there, but they were very liminal. The Folklore Commission was interested in them and a few other oddbods. But so like my book, came out in September, and the publishers, Guild publishers, said, okay, this is a nice book. It'll slowly sell. It'll sell maybe 1,000 copies between now and Christmas, and then we'll print 5,000, and it'll last you for a year and a half, and that'll be it. And so within 3 days, that book was sold out. And then they republished it, it was sold out. Another 3 days was sold out. So we have this renewed interest in nature. And in the same way, like you were mentioning Tim Robinson and Robert Macfarlane. So Robert Macfarlane did an amazing deed, 20 years ago, started writing about nature in England, in Britain, in Scotland, England, Wales, and people were interested in it. And again, Robert Macfarlane wasn't a national name in Ireland. We weren't quite ready to be interested in nature at the time. We had Tim, who was an Englishman, who came with that perspective and did his amazing writing. But again, published by Lilliput for a while until Faber took it on, but it was really Americans and British people were reading him. There wasn't widespread. And now we have the like of Seán's book and my book, and there's this amazing young naturalist in Northern Ireland, Dara McNulty, if I have that name. These books are coming out saying, let's look again at our environment, at our landscape. And there have, over the years, you could point out a few books that have done this, but they haven't got wide readership. At the moment, something is happening, and the public seems to be interested to reconnect with what is wild. Like Wild Nathan has always been there, but we've ignored it. There's been the odd hiker, and now you see people that are slowly interested in the Bangor Trail, in reconnecting. So it seems to be an exciting time. And
could I cut in here just with an observation? I'm thinking of Robert Macfarlane's book Landmarks, which is kind of based on this argument that, there was that dictionary that was edited by Oxford, a junior dictionary, and they were taking out all these words for conquer and newt and otter, and he was appalled. So he sets out to try to restore these words, and that leads to the other book, Lost Words. But as Macfarlane is writing there about this idea of the loss of language, loss of words for very ordinary things, I'm reading that and I'm thinking, hey, hang on a sec, but this is what has happened in Ireland with Anglicization. This is what happened to us, if you like. And I'm thinking of a passage towards the end of Douglas Hyde's Literary History of Ireland, where Hyde, I don't think Hyde was naturally a polemicist, but he really was very, very angry at that point, where he's describing the effect of education on Irish-speaking children who are, they're not allowed to take their language with them into the classroom, and they're being given an impoverished curriculum, through English, and there's this huge loss. And Hyde is very, very angry at that stage, and I do think that the language issue is part of the disconnect in our culture with the natural world, or with the living world, or with the environment. Not my favorite word, but and that's where I really, really enjoyed the aspect of the words you're giving us here, Manchán, in your book. Some of them, many of them relating to the sea, for instance. It's particularly rich regarding the marine environment and the different phenomena that are observed by fishermen and by shore shore folk. It's fantastic. It's really very rewarding. One of my favorite little pieces from your book is you have a word called, if I pronounce it correctly, cuile, little ripples bounding the current in the middle of a swollen stream. And the angler in me just wants to kind of cast a fly and swing a fly into that current, because that suggests to me a place where a salmon or a sea trout might actually be sitting during a flood. So cuile, beautiful word. And I loved as well that word for the salmon, far tine. That was just great. So I feel that, you know, in Ireland we have a particular angle. We're coming at this language debate from a particular angle, and a very rich angle, because of the Irish language legacy, which, you know, the Gaelic legacy is there in Macfarlane as well, as he writes about Scotland. I think you'll agree. But of course, it's so germane to our own legacy as well.
Yeah.
Manchán, Mayo was a rich ground for you in terms of collecting material. Sorry to interrupt there, but
Yeah. So again, like I realized about 10 years ago, I started coming to Mayo a lot. Mayo County Council, in fact, asked me to come and walk the walks. They were putting these new trails in. And I just started walking them, and I started getting to know Mayo a lot at the time. But like this journey that since COVID, the whole of Ireland seems to be on, and maybe the whole world, of reconnecting with their environment, you can trace pivotal points in this. And one was the Mayo Greenway, but before that was Joss Lynham. I hope I pronounced his name right. You know, one of the first great hikers who set up the trails from Dublin and Wicklow out, and people walked. Because what Seán's book, it's working on so many different levels. Seán, in the simple way, Seán just sets out to do a series of walks. And in those walks, he brings us in to how the walk affects him psychologically, how his botanist's mind and sort of bird lover's mind and naturalist mind will observe things, which is something the Irish didn't have. We didn't have that academic aspect to our appreciation of nature. And then he'll go into place names, and then he'll go into the wider Nathan mythology. But so it all starts almost with Joss Lynham saying, go for a walk. It's that simple. And that was a concept. Do you remember in the 70s and 80s, we didn't go for a walk. So you would see Germans walking. I was out in West Kerry. You'd see Germans walking with their yellow raincoats. And an Irish person, Irish farmer, we didn't even have raincoats. We certainly didn't have Gore-Tex. It rained, and we did that. We put the collar up on our tweed jacket. This is actually a good Mayo jacket, a good Foxford tweed jacket.
Yeah.
But that was what we did to walk. So along then comes Joss almost in the late 70s, 80s. He says, here are walking trails. And then that would does well. And then almost the next step is the greenways. Mayo County Council talking to the community and saying, you remember you used to be able to walk in the fields behind you. Why don't we restart that? And then that became a phenomenon. Every other county, and me as a travel journalist, I would be, you know, every county would say to me, how can we become Mayo? And I just say, you know, they did it. They didn't throw money at this. They slowly talked to the community and interested the people. Then they set up Ballycroy National Park and connected. I'd always heard about those mountainy men was one way they were described to me, but those men and people who still lived up in the Neff and up in sort of in the wilds of Eris. And they sort of connected with them and told their stories in the centre. But then we were at a stop, and then because Mayo did so well with their greenways, they started putting on hikes everywhere, and people will get the train to Westport, and now we're doing that all over Ireland. So as we're doing that, we immediately get the psychological benefit from walking, which Seán tracks, but then we want to know more. And so there is now, that's why this interest in the books is coming along. People want to know about the heritage, they want to know about the natural element, they want to know about the folklore. And so, although, as you've so rightly described, there are these similarities between Seán and my books, there's likely going to be so many more of these coming, because every region needs to have its mythology, its nature elements, its sort of, its botany, its geology communicated in an accessible way. So I think we're at the beginning of something really exciting.
And of course, there's a prospect now of of a vaccine, of getting vaccinated, of life at some stage later this year beginning to open up again. And I do feel that people have a new appetite for discovering their own area. It even happened last summer, actually. People were coming to the west of Ireland. There were a lot of stories about people who traveled to Achill, for instance. They'd never been to Achill before, and they had a lovely time, even though the weather was no great shakes. They spent 2 weeks on Achill in July, and they have booked for next year. So I think there is a lot of interest, which is already there, loaded and ready to go again, as and when those things are possible.
Just as we come towards the close, I felt with all of your books, just they really were designed to be held. If there was ever books that would send the kind of digital versions to the scrap heap, I think it's the two here. I'm just wondering, would you mind sharing with us the background, the sleeves and the cover and the artwork on the books? Manchán maybe might include C. Tamagotchi as well, I think, which is worthy of mention. And again, I think that's one, as far as I know, that was produced in Mayo.
So I mean, my book, was produced by Gill, and to their fair, they decided, let's go for a hard copy. So 32 words, and they got this Seán Dugan, this local sort of graphic designer in Dublin, who was using basically woodcuts, and he designed the book by deciding, let's first make images with a load of woodcuts for every chapter, and just made it into a beautiful thing. And as you say, we had thought that the age of the book was dead. But obviously people like that visceral feel. And then C. Tamagotchi was just a little book I published. So Red Fox Press is one of the most inspirational little publishing houses under Sliabh Moor on Achill, on top of the cliff there in Dugart. They make these handmade books on the kitchen table overlooking the cliffside. And I had collected a load of coastal words from Erris, from Achill, and from Donegal and Galway. And I collected 40 of the most evocative coastal words and put them into this little handmade book called C. Tamagotchi. So that because it was handmade, and it was sort of the drawings that Antic Ham, that the artist who lives there in Achill Island, had done herself, it has this visceral immediacy.
And could I just mention, as we're talking about your book, Manchán, for me, one of the really exciting things about it is the way you connect through your family with the legacy of the Blasket Islands and of West Kerry. I think it's really, really exciting. The story you tell there about your grandmother, Sheila Humphreys, and this insistence on Irish as your first language, and the experience you have there with the old Blasket Islanders who had been resettled on the mainland and whom you met. That is a very exciting connection with what I think most people would agree is one of the richest legacies that we have. So I found it very gratifying that we have this tarsach, we have this portal into that world. Okay, so here's my one. That's Wild Nathan, and for me it was calling in a few favors and cajoling a few people into contributing to it. And the watercolor there is by a friend of my wife's, actually, who's now working as a graphic designer in Germany. But she visited and she took some photographs and she did a watercolor, and she set up the cover technically. Photographs are my own. We're all photographers nowadays. Anyone with a Samsung or an iPhone in the pocket is a photographer. So you just click as you go, and one photograph in 50 might be worth something. And it's often, I have no technical ability, but sometimes you're at the right place. You see something unusual, click, you have it in your pocket. And you see behind me here books from my father's library. He was a book dealer and a collector. So I suppose I have some appreciation of the book as an object. And as we were preparing this, I wanted it to be as good as it could possibly be in terms of production, something that could join older books on the shelf and be there for the duration. We got it printed locally by an outfit called KPS in Knock. We got it hardcover with a thread sewn binding and on nice paper and so on. So we did as good a job as we could do on it, and I'm proud to see it there on the shelf beside some of the other books we've mentioned this afternoon.
Seán, you mentioned Eagle Country at the outset, and you had the very good fortune to spot a golden eagle in the course of your wanderings. Yeah. You do kind of tussle a bit in the book with the whole concept of rewilding, and you look at it from very many perspectives. Are you optimistic for the future? Now, I know I'm conscious of your afterword in the book where you put it in the context of globalization and so forth, but just, are you optimistic of us seeing golden eagles in the skies around Navan in the near future?
I think on that particular topic, I think sea eagles are doing quite well, and we've had another reintroduction program last year. There was some more birds were brought over from Norway, and the birds did quite well in their Irish breeding territories last year. So I think things are looking well for the eagle going forward. The deer are doing well also, and it was a good year for salmon. We were watching spawning salmon on a few little streams there just before Christmas. So yeah, I think the future for the national park and the Wild Navan project is quite good, but I think we're certainly at a crisis point globally in the wider picture. We seem to have all this knowledge, we've got all the awareness, we've all the research, but it's really now to get the gears shifting politically so that something can be done on the front of the issues of climate change and biodiversity crisis. But really, that's goes way beyond my competence. But I'm just hopeful that the political momentum is there now for something for things to change.
Manchán, I might just come back to you.
Fergal, can I, if you were going to ask me a question, what I'd most like to say is that, my book, I suppose, was saying that we don't understand things in nature unless we have a word for them. And so if you re-say the word, you see nature differently. That's a concept in all, particularly Native American beliefs. But when we walk, more of us are walking, but we won't understand a walk unless we know how to look. And that's what Seán's book describes. It is based in Wild Navan, but it could be in any of the hill ranges and mountain ranges that we're walking more. So, I mean, you rightly pointed out his description of seeing a juvenile golden eagle. That is going to stay with anybody who has the honor of reading that, far more than the cover of the book than anything else, or even his encounter with a fox or with meadow pipits or with buzzards or peregrine falcons. We're all walking, but our eyes aren't quite as observant or quite as educated as Seán has, through years of being interested in this topic. But all it takes for us is one description in a book, and our eyes suddenly see it next time we're walking. And that's the revelatory aspect of this book. It'll change how you regard the world from now on in. And it's what I was seeking in my book, but what Seán really accomplishes in Wild Navan. And that's why these books are so powerful. And there needs to be more of them. There need to be more of these books that are beautifully capturing the observations of nature, and then there need to be more readers for them.
If I can just come in here, I'm very flattered, and I suppose I can acknowledge the fact that Wild Navan is an area that hasn't had a big corpus of literature, unlike Arran or Connemara. When Tim Robinson arrived, there was a lot to go on. At the same time, I have gone through these places, I've written my account, but I'm sure, and Robinson talks about this as well, there are so many other aspects to any particular landscape, and that I picked up what I knew, what I believed I could witness honestly, with some authenticity, but I'm sure there are other books, there will be another book or books or maps about this area that might pick up on very different aspects. I mean, I was aware, for instance, that I'm not strong on geology, I could have written more about this or about that or the other. There are many cruxes, as you will well know, Manchán, around the issue of place names and the Irish language. For instance, you have the word mean among your words for field. Now there is mean, of course, it's a smooth place. I think, is that right? It's the basic meaning there is the idea of smoothness, or maybe something that's even or a level area. But there's an area in Navan called Mean Namarafach, and I have no idea what that means. But that's just one example of a little crux that might be worth a few pages, and you know, you could multiply that by many, and you could write a supplement to this, or maybe Wild Nathan 2, in which you go back and revisit all these bizarre little names that I certainly wasn't able to solve. You know, there's a little stream, a beautiful salmon stream that comes down past the Blue Lodge into the Owen Duff, and it's called Moyfigil. It's called the Moyfigil stream. Now, what Moyfigil is, I think Moy is probably the plain, but the Figil is a complete mystery, and so on and so forth. There are so many of these cruxes, and I'm sure each of them is worth at least a few pages. So there is just so much to explore.
Manchán, I might just conclude with one of your quotes, if that's, or one of your pieces, and I felt it kind of had a common denominator with Seán's, with the Neolithic burial ground up underneath Benkerm. And let me see, Manchán is the one of Seal 3 Veal Vor, Seal Umra Awan, Seal 3 Umra, Seal and Down. And I had heard Dr. Seamus Caulfield from Caja mention that before, and I just, when we think about the future and we think where we've come from and where we're going, you might just give us the context of that, if you wouldn't mind. I feel I'm asking for a song request here, so apologies for the forthright nature of it, but I think it's a very, very powerful sentiment. Yeah.
And in fact, it was Seamus Caulfield who reminded me of it too about 4 years ago, and I remembered my grandmother had said it long ago. But Sail 3 Veal Vor, Sail Umaravan, Sail 3 Umara, Sail and Down. So Sail 3 Veal Vor, Sail Umaravan. The life of 3 meal moors, of 3 whales, is the life of one cultivation ridge, one growing ridge. And then Sail 3 Umara, Sail and Down. The life of 3 cultivation ridges is the life of the world. Now, a whale was considered to live 1,000 years. They actually live about 100 years. But so then 3 1,000s is 3,000 years, and certainly Seamus Caulfield will show you cultivation ridges from the Bronze Age around where is he living in
Belderrick. Belderrick, yeah.
Yeah, Belderrick. And then the life of 3 cultivation ridges, then it's cultivation ridge of 3,000 years old. The life of 3 cultivation ridges is 9,000 years. So then you're back to when humans first arrived after the last ice age, 11,000 years ago. So it seems that a proverb like that would have encoded within it the folk memory of when we first landed on this island. And that is the sort of thing that you will find among indigenous people, among native people, but it's not something you're going to find with other cultures in mainstream Europe. And that's why Ireland is so rich and there's so much more to be discovered within it.
So maybe on that note, note to Shin, Manchán, Seán, Gurmil Magi, as Ochta Mädchen, Vishahar Kian, our muichas again led Dave Brennan, August on Firin Urfad in Casa Bookshop. It's very important, I suppose, that we support our independent bookshops at the moment. And I know Dave and the team there have an online service that they're providing. So mayobooks.ie. So Shinawil Wenya, Gudzi and Hedor Ella, Kunyigi Slán Sovelsa, August Gudzi Shif Slán.
Gurmagat Argil. Slán Manchán.
Slán